about the 4 principles of Eros. The previous videos, which we'll link below, or you can find them in our video content under live streams on YouTube or here on Rumble. We've been talking about the expressions of healthy sexuality, and so we started this out by last week we talked about the 6 elements of sexual development, early childhood development. And prior to that, Jen, what was the initial one? I'm blinking. How we started out, just sort of the summary of it. We were talking about sort of the healthy sexuality. What does that look like? The 4, qualities of Eros, and the healthy framework for sexuality, which is awareness, integration, and individuation. But last week we were talking about, or in the previous video, the 6 elements of sexual development. We really covered all of those areas in which, between the ages of 0 to 7, and then a consistent pattern following into 12 years old and beyond, how our senses and movement and emotions and, our needs, our desires, and pleasure play can all really predetermine and shape our sexuality and our expression of it. And, moving into now, where we are going to talk more about the 4, qualities of Eros, or the 4 principles of Eros, and how those will fit into a healthy sexuality framework of awareness, integration, and individuation. So just a little quick reminder of catching us up. Healthy sexual development supports all of those 6 elements in our early childhood development in all areas, in family and schools and organizations and churches, community, etc. So we are, to have a healthy sexual development, we are supported in the development and growth in all 6 of these areas. This leads to how we express ourselves sexually as sexual beings, through creativity, imagination, fantasy, desire, intimacy, connection with others, all of that. All of these 6 elements of development will shape how we express ourselves, and also shape our experiences and the way we relate to the experiences of sex and connection and relationships. And so let's go look a little deeper into that. So the 4 qualities of Eros are emotional intimacy, sensual pleasure, playful pleasure, finding pleasure through play, and reverence of other, which is affection. You're an adoration of the other person, an affection towards the other person, a curiosity of the other person. And these are my 4 qualities. This is how I break it down, because Eros is a mythological Greek god of love and passion. So a lot of people relate Eros to lust and infatuation and sexual instinct, which some of that is true. But Plato had some interpretations of Eros, as well as Freud, as well as Carl Jung, and a lot of philosophers and psychologists and psychoanalysts sort of have their own spin. But when I look at all of that, including the mythology and the history of Eros, I just find there's 4 main qualities that fit within Eros. And I like the way that Carl Jung talks about the 5 stages of Eros expression. So the 5 stages is not what qualifies Eros. The 5 stages qualifies how you express those qualities of Eros. And so it's almost like an archetypal journey, from adolescence to, the wise man, the wise woman, through this individuation journey. And one way to look at it is, the first stage of Eros expression would be biological. It's very instinctual. So you're hitting puberty, and of course you're feeling all kind of things tingling and moving, and you have crushes, and you're infatuated with a girl in your biology class, or maybe you have a crush on your teacher. It's like that's that initial stage of Eros. It's very adolescent. And then you move into the romantic stage, which is more of like a idealistic sort of fantasy of falling in love. And we get older, and by the time we've had several relationships in our lives, then we start to move into the stage of expression of relational, the yearning to connect with somebody, the yearning to have a connection. And so I'll talk about these more in depth, but as we remember kind of where we were going back to, ways to create a healthy sexual experience, ways to create healthy sexual expression, and reclaim your own sexuality in healthy ways. And so, if you haven't watched the video on the 6 elements of sexual development, I encourage you to do that, because what you can do is you go back and you look at those 6 areas: your sensate development, your emotional development, the development of your desires, and how those are expressed and supported and encouraged. The movement development, anything from crawling to walking to running to climbing, all of those things. The pleasure play development, your needs development, all of those things. You can go and almost just do an inventory on all of these areas of development and say, okay, well, where was I underactivated? If that developmental area was underactivated, then you may have dissociated from that in terms of your sexuality, your sexual identity, and dissociated that from your sexual experiences. So if needs, for example, if you expressed needs as a child and it became a familiar, reoccurring experience that your needs were dismissed or neglected or shamed or told they were wrong, you may then disassociate yourself from the needs in relationship to your sexuality. So maybe now you don't have this need, that instinctual connection, the mind-body connection, as we had talked about before, where that then disconnects, and that the instinctual, the sex instincts that we all have, biological instincts we all have, may then become separated. And so when we begin to feel those urges or experience those things or those sensations, we're dissociated from those, and we don't see them as a need. We are then, we're feeling them, we're experiencing them, but we then may feel ashamed or guilty or afraid of them. And so it's important to do sort of that inventory, as I talked about in the other video, of in what ways that you, in your best recollection, can identify ways in which you had underactivated development in those 6 elements, or maybe even overactivated. So say needs development, you were just given everything you need. All your needs were, going back to that, all your needs were provided for, they were supported, they were encouraged, almost to the point where it became excessive. So then you can develop almost a level of narcissism, entitlement, and again, not saying that in a very negative way. I think those words can be seen as negative, but it becomes self-centric. Whereas you have a difficult time understanding through the overactivated, which becomes the attachment. In adult, there's an attachment to. You have a confusion between want and need. There's a confusion between instinct, intuition, fantasy. They become fused, and it creates a disillusionment that your want is actually a need, and you don't know how to draw the boundaries between those and what can manifest. For again, an example, when we're looking at our development and our sexual identity, our identity as a creative sexual being, and our relationship to those experiences, you may confuse want and desire. You may confuse a want and a need. Those are now just fused together, and so now your sexual instinct is perceived as a need to fulfill. And if that resonates, just want to encourage you to have a compassionate understanding for yourself. This is common. I think a lot of people just don't like to talk about it too much because it seems icky and ugly and uncomfortable. And we all have certain traits and characteristics that make us unique. And so the healthy sexuality framework, the first step is awareness. So when we become aware of ourselves, again, doing the inventory of our development in those 6 elements, those 6 areas, and seeing in which ways we are overactivated, underactivated. Overactivated means now there's an attachment to, underactivated means there's a disassociation. And so then we go into the principles of Eros, again, looking at that. And so these qualities of Eros are important to look at because, it's like emotional intimacy, or what's our relationship? Let's start with awareness. That's the conscious relationship with sexual instincts, honestly assessing and understanding what our desires are for emotional intimacy. Is it a projection? Is it a fantasy? Is it an unmet need? Awareness is reactivating the sort of the entangled schemas of the unconscious self systems, the unconscious self-operating systems, and so it becomes, the awareness becomes the gateway to relational work with those unconscious or subconscious self-operating systems. And you pass those through consciousness. That's just the first step. So when we evaluate each of the 6 elements of sexual development, we are becoming consciously related to those self-operating schemas of the psyche. And so then we ask ourselves, okay, healthy sexuality framework, awareness, integration, individuation. Let's start with awareness. Let's start with awareness to emotional intimacy. So what is your emotional frequency? What is the emotional frequency of your desire, of your sex drive? When you feel those sexual instincts come up, what is the emotional frequency of that? Do your desires move you closer or further towards or from emotional intimacy? And what I mean by that, when you have a desire, when you have, this sexual desire or this desire to connect with someone, what does that, not only what is the frequency, the emotional frequency of that, but does that emotional frequency move you closer or further from emotional intimacy? And I'll say that again, because it may sound convoluted, but it's actually quite simple. When I desire something, when I desire someone, when I desire sexual intimacy, what is the emotional frequency of that? And does the emotional frequency move me further or closer to emotional intimacy? That'll give you a lot of awareness, just asking yourself that question. Going from awareness to emotional intimacy, now moving into sensual pleasure. So that's one of the other qualities of Eros. If we look at sensual pleasure, looking at the awareness, is my desire motivated by my senses? If so, what senses is it motivated by? How is it motivated by these senses? What is the outcome? What is the desire relationship to these senses? what activates your sensuality? This could be different for a lot of people. It could be soft touch, it could be firm touch, it could be smells, it could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be any sort of movement, it could be imaginative, intuitive. So what activates your sensuality, and what does sensuality look like to you, and what does it feel like to you? That's different for everybody also. Again, bringing awareness to that quality of eros. And the second part of that is, do you know what activates your partner's sensuality? What does that look like for your partner? How is that different between the two of you? Is there a compensation relationship between the two? Are they similar? Explore that. Again, awareness. We're moving into the playful pleasure through play. This could be foreplay, but it also doesn't have to be erotic, sexual, experiences. This could all be a part of what is activating and awakening the connection that is that part of the quality of eros. So playfulness is really important. It's not just foreplay. So bringing step one, awareness, into the playfulness or pleasure through play quality of eros. Ask yourself, what activities, movements, or interactive engagements stimulate your desire through joy, creativity, fun. And what of those activities or engagements incorporate an emotional intimacy and sensuality and reverence, which are the other three. So pleasure through play should in some way activate emotional intimacy, affection, and sensuality and sensual pleasure. So there could be some polarity at play there. But, what are those activities? Is it flirting? Is it playing games? Is it cuddling, or is it wrestling? Is it, watching funny movies together? Is it going on adventures? Things like that. What is your idea of playfulness that bridges a connection between all of those qualities of eros, the emotional intimacy, the sensuality, and the affection for the other person? Again, could be different, but you're bringing awareness into that quality of eros. So let's bring awareness into the reverence of other. So again, we're creating a conscious relationship with our sexual instincts to assess and understand our desires. So looking at reverence, is your motivating desire activated by thoughts of devotion or devouring? Devotion is adoration, curiosity. Devouring is more of the objectification. What non-physical qualities of your partner or your desired partner inspire your deep respect? And how can you honor those non-physical qualities? What is it about those non-physical qualities that sort of inspire or activate or charge the electricity of that desire? That's what the reverence of other is. And so again, everybody's different, and men and women are very different when it comes to that. When I think of the activating element of desire in terms of reverence as the quality of eros, when I think of Alex, it's more of this, the non-physical qualities are, he's just so absolutely calm and present, and that it disarms me. And so when I feel disarmed, I feel relaxed, I feel open, and that is the doorway towards creating or in establishing emotional intimacy and surrendering to receive and experience the sensual pleasure and the sensuality of these engagements and the playfulness, which of course he is a very playful person. He definitely activates that in me. So let's move into integration. Awareness was the first step. So integration of the four qualities of Eros, starting again with emotional intimacy. So now that you asked yourself some things like, what is the emotional frequency of my sex drive? Do my desires move me closer, further from emotional intimacy? Are these desires expressed or suppressed? How? Why? So that's the awareness, bringing ourselves into the awareness of that. Integration is alchemizing the inner anima and animus into consciousness through the tension of opposites or polarities. So emotional intimacy brought us into awareness, and we want to ask, like, what are the feminine and masculine qualities of my emotional expression, my partner's emotional expression? Are there feminine and masculine qualities of emotional expression suppressed in myself, in my partner? If so, which ones? What creates an emotional connection with me and my partner? Or potential partner? What would create that emotional connection? What fractures it? What qualities may fracture that, and which of those are feminine and masculine? And so in what ways am I projecting my inner polarity onto my partner or my potential partner, desired partner? That's the integration. You bringing yourself into that awareness with your emotional frequency, and then you're really digging in what ways are these emotional frequencies as part of my sexual experience and sexual identity. In what ways are these tension of opposites within self? What qualities are feminine and masculine? And am I overexpressing, underexpressing, which ones, and how? Then we move integration to sensuality. Again, we're going into the sensual pleasure part of Eros. We talked about what our desires are motivated by, what activates them in ourselves and our partners. So the integration is asking which one of these, feminine versus masculine sensuality, how do you define that? How do you define the masculine quality of sensuality? How do you define a feminine, sense of sensuality? What do those qualities look like? Some may think the feminine sensuality is, soft and graceful. What is the masculine sensuality? How do you define that? Everybody's going to be different in how we define that. So integration is really digging into that. What are my projections and how I define these things, and how do I see myself as that? How do my defined qualities of sensuality between feminine and masculine, how do they mirror something in myself that I suppress? So how are those being mirrored? Or are we projecting an unincorporated part of ourself? So what do you and your partner need to do to harmonize these tensions of opposites? It's not together. It's in order to harmonize and form that union, that connection, the harmony together, you both have to do that within yourself first. And when you imagine doing that, imagine what would interfere with that. What is interfering with me being able to express myself this way sensually? What is familiar about the way I express or experience my sensuality this way? And how does that interfere with me being able to incorporate the thing that I suppress that is stopping me from fully experiencing and moving into that sensual experience. So then we move into, again, playfulness, looking at, pleasure through play. We already talked about the awareness, that we brought awareness to it. Like, what activities, movements, engagements stimulate your desire, stimulate and activate the other 3 qualities of Eros. So integration would be like looking, it's polarity at play, sort of some examples I gave earlier. Are you cuddling or wrestling? Are you dancing or are you wrestling? Flirting or are you admiring? Teasing or are you roasting? You going on a date or are you going on an adventure? Are you touching softly or are you touching firmly? Is it fast? Is it slow? Look at the polarity dynamics in our playfulness and pleasure through play. And again, sort of like other questions we were asking earlier is, what am I suppressing? What do I avoid? And you may avoid because it's just not something you enjoy. But the way to integrate is to be honest about it. It's an honest assessment of it. And it may be your truth, but it also may be something worth exploring. That's what integration is. So integration through the reverence of other. We looked at the awareness. What is our motivating desire activated by thoughts of? Is it devotion and adoration, or is it devouring and objectification? The integration of that is, again, feminine versus masculine qualities that you admire in your partner, that cause you discomfort from your partner. How do these mirror your own unseen or unincorporated anima or animus? How are these mirroring you? Integration is all about looking at the polarity dynamics. And everything has a feminine and a masculine quality. It's the active, the underactive, or the there's the push, the pull. Everything has it's very binary. And of course, there's a spectrum along the line, but the opposites, the tension of the opposites. That's what integration is, looking at those tension of opposites. And so going back to, 4 qualities of Eros, the last step of creating a healthy sexuality framework is individuation. So with emotional intimacy, sensuality, playfulness, and reverence, it's the same thing across the board. It's applying those self-revelations through the questions, the awareness and then self-assessing. It's applying those self-revelations through sexual dynamics into active practice. This bridges your shadows into consciousness. So when you apply and practice, that's you're creating an experience of individuation. And Carl Jung talked about this too, as in the 5 stages of Eros expression, that individuation is a large part of our sexuality, the sexual framework of us as a sexual being, a creative being, and partner in relationships. It's that desire to connect. So through that desire to connect and be in union with another, we are becoming more whole of ourselves. The relationship, the other person doesn't make us whole. The qualities that they mirror are activating our own, psychic contents to come from the unconscious to the conscious. That's what makes us whole. And so we talked about shadow vows. Is that right, Jen? I believe we talked about shadow vows. So you think I'm talking to myself?
We did, yeah.
Jen is there.
We sure did.
It sounds like I'm talking to myself. She's there. She's a real person.
I am.
People are watching this. Is Jen in the room with us right now? No. Anyway, yeah. So we talked about shadow vows, and again, you can go look at the videos. We have that. If you're not signed up for our newsletters, definitely do that. There's also a link here for that, because you'll get all of this. Shadow vows are really important for our own individuation, and I literally create the whole format and the scripts on creating your own shadow vows, so that your relationship, whether intimate partner, friendship, whatever, can become the foundation for you to individuate and become whole. So go look for that if you're interested in that, because that is a huge part of this. So when Carl Jung talked about the 5 stages of Eros expression, so here's the 4 qualities. I don't want to confuse y'all. The 4 qualities of Eros, emotional intimacy, affection and curiosity, sensual pleasure and playful pleasure. Those are the qualities. And so Carl Jung talked about their stages, as I shared in the very beginning, the stages of how we express. So the first stage is biological. This is very instinctual. This is where we experience like infatuation and lust, and we can become, we can experience a little bit of dependency on it. Shadows that are revealed through this are projection, possessiveness, or even addiction to love, addiction to sex. The second stage that we move into is romantic. This is more idealistic. So our desire for connection is being expressed. We're wanting to connect. We're expressing that desire. We're fantasizing about what that looks like, which is not a bad thing. We're fantasizing about that. It's like when you watch the movie The Notebook and you're just like, oh, that's such a romantic expression of Eros. And that's good. So this is the life force, mind you, too. When we talk about sexuality and we talk about, this won't come off. This is funny. There we go. Hi. When we talk about Eros and sexuality, we're also talking about creativity. You may have picked up on that because it's all the same. It's all about creativity, and it's that life force that inspires and activates the creativity. And so romantic love, which is the second stage of Eros expression, that's also the life force that inspires creativity and artistic expression. So a lot of artists, that includes musicians and painters and poets and writers, they are expressing the romantic stage of Eros. Some of them get into stage 5, and I'll talk about that in a second. Those are called the neurotic, crazy artists. They become possessed by it. But that's important thing to note. It's a distinction, but it's the same thing. The romantic expression of Eros is an inspiring thing. We're inspired to connect, and that desire activates the spiritual will that gives us the passion that gives us that electrical force to move towards something. And all artists are expressing this in one way or another. And it's another way to look at art, anyone's art, whether it's writing or poetry or painting, drawing, singing, lyrical, all of that. When you listen and see and visualize and read what they're expressing, look at it as from the framework of this person is expressing their Eros, this romantic expression of the Eros, and see if that changes the way that you hear the music, read the poems, see the art. It really gives you a look into that person's psyche. It's very beautiful. So the third stage of Eros expression is relational. So this is intimacy. So it becomes a mutual desire for connection. It's beyond, the personal fantasy, beyond just the physical. We are looking to express Eros through intimacy and connection. And the shadow aspect of that could be sort of the avoidance of our own self-integration. It's the continued projection of the other person. We're more focused on the other person as the other rather than the other person as a reflection of our unseen self. And quickly, because of number 2, romantic expression of Eros, I didn't talk about the shadow. The shadow of that can be a disillusionment, like a codependency and spiritual bypassing. Which we see a lot of. And just sort of like, David Hawkins' map of consciousness, you have the sort of all the different colors, the map of consciousness, and we can float in between these levels. throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout our seasons of life. We can go up and down, up and down. It's like once you've graduated elementary school and moved into middle school, you don't forget everything you learn in elementary school. You still go back and use the things you learned and then forward. It's just once you're in middle school, you have not yet achieved or experienced or understood what you learn in high school. So you can go in between these stages and levels throughout your life. But you want to look at in terms of where you are now and how you experience or express eros in your relationship or in your life. Which stage are you at? Which stage do you want to be at? And you may have had a relational expression of eros in your last relationship, but maybe your current one is romantic. And that's a stage, that's fine. You're moving along. But if you have not fully experienced the fourth stage of eros, that is something you want to aspire to experience and then be able to express. So let's get into that. Transpersonal is the individuation, as we talked about. It's applying our own self-revelations through this connection, through this relationship, through this sexual intimacy, and dynamics into an active practice that bridges you into wholeness. The unconscious contents of the psyche then becomes conscious. So when we talk about, stage 4 is transpersonal, it's about individuation. Love is a spiritual path to transformation and wholeness. And the shadows that can come about in this stage is sort of like an egocentric confusion between the spiritual experience and the self. It could be, so almost like you're now infatuated with the transcendence. So you can almost the shadow in stage 4 can manifest and look like number 1. So if we don't fully integrate each stage, then that can show up in stage 4, the transpersonal expression of eros is sort of like this, you're infatuated with the experience of transformation through sex. So it's like you're using sexual dynamics and the relationship to grow. Superficially, that's not a terrible thing, but when you become obsessed with it and then you become possessed by that, you do separate with this illusion that you're not. If you have more questions about that, because I could go, that could send us into the weeds very quickly and get us lost. So if you have questions about that, absolutely, post your comment and reach out and we can address those. But it gets heavy there. Number 5 is archetypal expression. This is universal. This is when we express eros in all of life, through connection, compassion and creativity. So it's, we're connecting with nature, we're connecting with children, we're connecting with others, we're connecting with the sort of the energetic or the frequency of certain organizations or affiliations, communities, nations, peoples. We connect it all through this, again, the main quality of eros is connection. We're looking at it through that lens of all life. It's all life is the life itself. The life force of the deer in my backyard is the life force that lives in me and through me. There's this connection with it. There's this compassion for that. And it inspires creativity. It inspires that sense, to create and move through life creatively. The shadow of that, you can become very ungrounded, disconnected from self. disconnected from your physical self, meaning you kind of lose touch with your own needs and boundaries. And I know a lot of people like that, that you kind of get into this, you can, any ayahuasca journey, any sort of plant medicine journey or ceremony you do, you're going to experience that archetypal expression of eros. I mean, it's almost sort of like the whole landscape of those types of ceremonies is you're experiencing this connectedness to everything. You're seeing the wholeness in everything and within yourself, and you're seeing all the missing pieces sort of come in, like forming this big giant complete puzzle. And it's euphoric, it's amazing. And you are experiencing the emotional intimacy with that, the sensuality, the playfulness, the affection, all of that. And then, then you got to come back to earth. You got to come back into your 3D body that you're here to live through. But some people, the shadow expression of that is they become addicted to it. They have the illusion that that is the end all be all, and that is the where you should be all the time, where you need to be all the time in order to be a good person. And you're just bringing out that shadow of like not good enough, because now you're addicted to being in that archetypal universal expression of eros and connected to it at all times. And I spoke about that too with talking about the 6 elements in sexual development. Some people just need, everything has to be this grand experience, this huge experience. They're trying to recreate that experience of the universal love, universal expression of eros. And that can be dangerous. Then you're just totally disconnected from yourself, from reality, from the world. So yeah, then we, again, going back, we look at the 4 principles of eros here, and then how can we create a healthy sexual framework for ourselves that's personal to ourselves, by one, do an inventory of those 6 elements in development, like here at the top. Do an inventory of those. Underactive, overactivated, have you become dissociated in any ways to your sexual expression and experiences in any of those 6 elements? Or are you attached to certain expressions of any of these elements in relation to your sexual experiences and sexual experience of yourself as a sexual being? Do that inventory. Then you look into the 4 principles of eros. These are the forming qualities of expression of eros, and move into those, awareness, integration, individuation, those questions, like becoming aware of what the emotional frequency is of your desire, becoming aware of what activates your sensuality, becoming aware of, what activities, engagements stimulate joy, creativity, fun, opening up the door to desire and connection, and what what thoughts describe that desire? Is it devotion or is it devouring? It's that awareness, moving into integration, then into individuation. And as we create that healthy framework of our sexuality and experiences, we move into the 5 stages, and look at those 5 stages once again, and ask yourself, where do you truly want to be? For the human experience, we do want to be at number 4, and we can move in between 1 and 4, 1 and 3, 4 and 2. We can move between those, but we want to at least achieve that stage of eros expression, as a human being. And stage 5 is great. You can experience that too, but in relationship, truly the goal is to use, not use, I want to take that word back. I'm going to take the word back, use. We want to experience our relationships and connection, our intimate experiences with others, as a form of becoming more whole, not fulfilling something, not playing with illusions, not living in disillusionment, not as a means to avoid any of the inner work. We ultimately want to achieve wholeness of ourselves through the dynamics of intimacy, through creativity. And so, just a little quick note in creativity, those are the two. Creativity and sexual intimacy have the same frequency. So that's why when I work with clients and when we talk about these things on BodhiBuilding and office hours, creativity is very important piece of personal development, inner growth, individuation. No matter where you're at, if you've got just a fitness goal, right, there are parts of the self that will show up as just entangled schemas of the unconscious, and their self-operating systems that will interfere and sabotage with the fitness goal. So no matter what the goal is, whatever the dream, whatever the vision, these schemas will show up. And I do talk about that. So I always bring creativity into my work with others, or as a guiding light, or as sort of an encouragement or inspiration for others to activate, the integration alchemy. And sometimes that's drawing a mandala or painting or writing a song or a poem. It's really important when we activate sort of that alchemy of integration, no matter what the goal or the vision is in our life. Creativity, that life force, is the same frequency as our sexual expression, the sexual instincts, the desire, all of that. Those are connected. So again, we can get into the weeds, and Jen, I don't want to do that too much because I could just keep on going. Maybe we'll have a part 4. I don't know. So stay tuned for that. If you're not on our newsletter list, get on that, because again, we cover a lot of this stuff in the newsletters in sort of like an educational presentation format that's easy to digest, no more than 3-minute read, Jen? I swear she's here.
Yeah,
I'm
I try and keep them between 3 and 5 minutes for sure. And, hitting all the highlights, giving framework, giving reflection ideas, giving some people kind of exercises to do at home and what to look for. Like, we're really good at breaking that down.
Mhm. Yeah, and they're great. They're great newsletters. They just really bullet points, heading bullet points that gives you a really great overview of, like, even if you don't, join us live, if you don't watch these videos, the newsletters in themselves are very educational. They're free. And they're there to help you, to guide you, to inspire you in one way or another, to bring awareness to something, to give you some ideas and concepts to consider if you're kind of stuck in certain areas. And we don't just talk about sex, and we don't just talk about, esoteric personal development or the noetics of, personal development, improvements, and things like that. We talk about all kinds of things. We talk about shoulder injuries, how to read or look at an MRI, and how to, if you have clients, how to analyze, lab reports, different types of detox methods, and nutrition and lifestyle, and fitness, and all of that. We talk about everything. Well, we put it in the categories. What are those, Jen? Health, strength, and wisdom. So those are the categories in which we discuss all of those things. Wisdom, we really talk a lot about, predominantly, I think, because it's what the world needs right now. We need more inspiration and connection, but we shouldn't get too detached or too far apart from our health and
Yeah.
physical bodies. So
We
it's all
also do, you guys also hit on a lot of business development. I just want to
Yes.
make sure that people really understand the depth of where you guys go, like great conversations around insurance, how to set up websites, like even such technical
Yeah.
stuff as that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we do. Because I would say 99% of the people in bodybuilding are business owners. They own businesses. Most of them are practitioners, providers, coaches, and people in that practitioners and providers and coaches. We're not good at business. We're just that's not our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is practicing, it's providing, it's coaching, it's helping. And so, yeah, Alex and I went through, over a decade of having to like figure all of that out. And so yeah, it's a big part of that we incorporate into bodybuilding is sort of like sharing the experiences and wisdoms and lessons that we learn. So hopefully others don't have to spend too long on that path like we did.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's what makes it so amazing is that the connection that you and Alex can have with other people and what they're going through. And I mean, I just have to say too that it's not just about you guys don't give business guidance to just like practitioners. Like we have someone that comes regularly that owns a, what's it called, a daycare in their house.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so, it's just being able to income, even if it's just business, related, it can be for any industry. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be for the coaching industry.
Yes, that's absolutely. And again, if you're interested in reversing chronic pain or health issues, or you're just really wanting a healthy lifestyle and you want to stay inspired and connected to things that connect you to that journey, and you're into fitness and you're into strength and keeping your body robust and moving along that path of individuation, that noetic development, then you'll find everything you need in bodybuilding, including, best business practices and things like setting up LLC and accounting and taxes and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's all through the values of health, strength, and wisdom. So those are the overarching values of everything we talk about in there. So who knows? Maybe there will be a part 4 to this. If you have any questions, if you were confused about any parts of it, just drop a comment and we'll answer you. I'll answer you as best I can, and we'll see you in the next video. Talk to you next week.